Toko koi te pō te kitea, tērā te toko kātū te toko te atua ki te pō. Haere te pō nau mai te ao. Ko ia ka mai rana ke he hine naro ka werohia, he nā kau ka huatakina, he manawa i māpuna, tai ahaha, tai ahaha. Kai nā manu tai kōroto nā mana nui, koutou ko whakarau i ka mairu nei tā tātou kaupapa e whakapāiti nei a tātou. I raro i te tua nui o tō tātou whare, e tāwharau nei a tātou i tēnei rā, tēnā koutou katoa. Kai nā kai kōrero koutou e tāre nei te kupu. I te kōrero, ka whakairotia ki nā pakitara o tō tātena whare, ki nā paupau e ria ki nei te whare tāhuhu kōrero, tēnei te mihiake kia koutou o tira, kia tātou i runa i te kaupapa. Nāna nei tātou i whakakao mai, a ko tātou rā tēnei kā noho i roto i nā koro matua o te wānana, tēnei te mihiake. Nō reira, āpiti hono tātai hono, ko te huna mate ki a rātou, āpiti hono tātai hono, a ko te huna ora ki a tātou, tātou e tau nei, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora.
Anga mana, anga reo, anga reo rangatira, o ngā hoewha, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Bryony James tōkuinga. My name is Bryony James. I'm the Provost here at Te Herenga Waka. It's my great pleasure this afternoon to welcome all of you, staff, students, alumni, members of the public, and people dialing in even from overseas to watch the live stream. Welcome to our collaborative debate on AI in the academy. It's a fairly trite thing for me to say that AI is a fairly hot topic right now. That's a given, obviously. But academia is grappling with both the challenge and the opportunity that artificial intelligence offers to us. In the teaching and learning space, it is both a tool that we can use and possibly a threat. And how do we learn to use that tool most convincingly and to everyone's advantage? In the research space, likewise, there's opportunities that AI offers, and there's concerns about some of the ethical obligations that come with it. In fact, it was a research-related incident that Ali and Alex Gibson encountered during their research, where AI was actually acting as a participant in their research that provoked the conversations that have led to this debate. So, you're not here to listen to me. Very luckily, we have one of our experts in AI, Professor Ali Knott, who's going to MC the debate. But just a word about the format. This is what's called a collaborative debate. So in a collaborative debate, it's incumbent upon each of our panelists to support and acknowledge a point made before them, and so then build on that and amplify the conversation. So I'm sure everybody here is prepared to listen with mutual respect and manakitanga, and without that, I'm no more to say, and thank you all for being here. I will see you again at the end. Thank you, and over to you, Ali.
Cheers, thanks very much. Kia ora koutou. It's nice to see an audience for this debate. There's nothing like a debate in a public place like this, and in the university, it's so important for this debate to extend to the entire university, and so it's great to see you all here. I'm guessing the Olympics is finished, and so now here you are. We've still got an interesting event for you. I wouldn't say contest, because this is collaborative, of course. So the structure of this is going to be that there will be 3 different sessions, and each session has 2 speakers. The first one is on, this is all to do with the role of AI in the university, ours and others, I think. The first is about AI in research, the second is about AI in teaching and learning, and the third one is about AI in the production of content or the production of knowledge. So without further ado, let's get going. We're going to have 2 of these speakers in each session. In the first session, the 2 speakers on the left here, we'll start with Andrew Lenson, and then we'll have Ali Gibson. So Andrew, let me call you. There's going to be 5 minutes for each speaker, and then we'll have 5-minute discussion. The discussion is just going to involve the panel here, but there will be an opportunity for everyone afterwards to participate at the end of the hour, basically. So, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Ali. It's great to be here, and it's great to be forced to be positive about AI for once. Usually I'm the great cynic, so I've been told I have to be nice and be positive about AI and research. Closer. There we go. Oh, My goodness, that is close. And I think this isn't something that Bryony said around the example of AI as a participant in studies. I think that's actually a really exciting opportunity. I mean, you guys had sort of a bad vibe with it, as the kids would say, I think. But there's a real potential for the use of AI in research for doing user studies and doing preliminary testing. And I think that's a really exciting topic. Why recruit 200 people when you can just have a chat GPT and get the whole of human thoughts? You know, who needs to spend money on research participants? But beyond that, there's lots of other ways that we can use AI in research. I mean, we do so much mundane stuff in our research. We have to write grants. Who likes writing grants? I thought Bryony might put her hand up. I mean, it's a useful process, but we spend so much time crafting these grants when you get a 10% chance getting funded. I mean, get ChatGPT to do it. You get your whole life back. It's great, right? And of course, on top of that, things like reporting for grants, things like proofing your writing, things like Grammarly are using AI, and they're a great way to learn how to use grammar properly and learn to write better. And even things like literature review and knowledge discovery. So when we, as researchers, when we want to do a new topic or we want to find a new line of inquiry, we look at literature. But there's so much out there, and if it's just us trying to trawl through Google Scholar, I mean, that's not effective. We have these tools that can search entire databases, can summarize information. You know, there's a massive role here for us to be smarter and more efficient researchers, and that means making more of a change to society and having better outcomes as well. And in that way, it's also a great democratizer. So I can code, well, I used to be able to code, but many of my colleagues in different disciplines perhaps aren't as confident about it. And yet coding is such a core part of research these days. Things like statistical analysis, things like data analysis in general, things like that, you can get AI to help you, and then it means no matter what your discipline is, you can also benefit from those techniques. Things, I know what t-test to use, or how many samples you need, or how to write this Python or R script. You don't need to learn that anymore. You get ChatGPT or whatever you want to write it for you. I mean, sure, you've got to check the results, but you can save a lot of time there, and you can sort of be much more powerful as a result. Another thing I find quite exciting is that AI can help us to think outside the box in our research. So all too often we get our own views, and we get, I guess, increasingly narrow-minded as we get more aware of our area, more aware of our topic. But if we have a chat with ChatGPT or another agent, maybe it can give us some new ideas, some different perspectives. How can we interpret these problems in different ways, or what are some things we might not have thought of? It can be our sort of co-pilot, not Microsoft Copilot, but our research co-pilot. And of course, AI as a general concept has massive potential in all sorts of domains, right? I do a lot of work with ecology, with lawyers, with geographers, looking at how we can use AI to solve environmental problems, to predict floods, to enable access to justice. So there's this massive area of research, not just in using AI tools, but developing new methods that can help us to get better outcomes and do innovative new research that will really change our world. And I think us as a university have a really good opportunity to do that. We have quite a few AI staff, we have a lot of really curious thinkers, and so there's a massive potential there as well. I thought I was going to go on for longer, but I somehow run out of points. So what we'll do is I will hand over to Abby, and then I guess we'll just discuss more afterwards.
Thanks, Andrew. So I forgot to say that Andrew is a colleague of mine from the School of Engineering and Computer Science, and Ali is from the School of Health, Ali Gibson. Please, your take on AI and research.
Tēnā koutou katoa. I'd first like to tautoko Andrew. We are facing an incredible opportunity for researchers to come together across disciplines to explore the impact of AI on our work. And I certainly never saw myself collaborating with my colleagues in computer science as a social scientist, but here I am today. What I've also learned, especially from critical conversations with colleagues like Simon McCallum, Alex Beattie, what you were talking about, Andrew, is that AI can be a tool to promote equity. For example, it can remove some of the barriers that we experience across an industry that is dominated by English, that it can make writing and publishing more accessible for non-native speakers. And I even concede that it is very tempting to give into the narrative of being time poor and wondering whether AI technologies could make some aspects of my job easier, quicker, or even take them off my plate altogether. Because we live in a world where productivity, speed, and time and profit are valued above all else, we've responded to AI enthusiastically and uncritically as the answer to our problems. And as Andrew alluded to, there are all sorts of programs and apps that are now available to shortcut the research process. So from a qualitative researcher's perspective, I now have access to AI-powered software that could write research proposals, review and read and summarize literature for me, take notes, transcribe my interviews, even code and analyze the data. So AI has seemingly replaced me as a qualitative researcher. But what of the quality of this AI-generated research? Would some even call this deep fake research? We question students' use of AI in assignments and learning, but what about our own use of generative AI and other AI technologies? Where would the role of AI end and that of the researcher begin? Is it the same as researchers using other digital technologies? Because my sense up till now is no. So these are the sorts of questions that I encountered with my team when doing field work for my Marsden grant funded by the Royal Society. We were looking to gather stories about people's experiences and perceptions of mobile dating during the height of the pandemic, and instead gathered generic, synthetic data, seemingly produced through AI, at the prompt of, wait for it, bots. And I won't rehash our published article, but to say that we decided that using such data would fail to serve the purposes of understanding emotion, people's responses to the pandemic and public health guidelines, and ultimately, the human condition. We've been approaching AI as a revolutionary tool or set of tools to be operated by humans. But researchers need to consider their use of AI as a matter of integrity and rigor, applying much more critical reflection, decision-making, and transparency than what's taken place as of yet. As a social scientist, what's at the forefront of my mind with the use of AI is the implication of using AI software, such as the content of sensitive interviews that I've conducted with cancer patients and how that might be used to train large language models, data that they didn't agree to be used for that purpose, or how data sovereignty might be navigated when data is entered into and stored in software that is not necessarily governed by the treaties of Indigenous rights. In saying this, I acknowledge that as academics, we come from varying perspectives in terms of how we view the world, how we study it, and make sense of it. I encourage researchers to critically evaluate the use of AI in relation to the foundational beliefs of their own disciplines. This might result in quite different responses and conclusions for different fields, but also hopefully with time, we might find points of agreement on what counts as the fair use of AI in conducting this research. And hopefully today's event will come some way in doing that. Some of this work is going to need to occur on an individual and social level, through introspection, through conversation between and amongst research colleagues. However, I also think that there's an opportunity for this work to be undertaken at the institutional level, in much the same way as it's starting to happen in the sphere of teaching and learning. So this could include publishing houses, funding bodies, and research offices determining their policies of AI use in the development, conduct, and dissemination of research, ethics and other research committees developing guidelines for fair use, or educational institutions reviewing what AI software is made available through licenses and that ensure the privacy and storage of data and protect the ownership of that data. So what I'm urging others to consider is that we need to focus less on the affordances of AI and more time on critically examining its use on the basis of ethics, rigor, and transparency and disciplinary principles underpinning our work. Thank you.
Thanks so much. So now, just a little discussion about AI in research. And I thought maybe I'd open this up with a question, maybe for both of you, but let's start with Andrew. Do you feel that consulting AI as an academic is going to take away from consulting your human colleagues? Because you might imagine that all of the brainstorming that you can do might also be done with humans, and so where do you draw the line, or how do you sort of apportion that work between humans? Because we don't want to take humans out of the loop, obviously.
That's a great question. I'm not going to try and be strictly positive anymore because it's unnatural. But thank you. But I will say, for one thing I think about it a lot is that if we use things like ChatGPT or any AI model to help us think about things, then in some ways that can lock us into one way of thinking. Because when you think about things like automation bias, when ChatGPT says to you, here are 10 ways you could structure your research, or 10 ideas, you sort of maybe get trapped a little bit into those 10 and think, well, these are the only 10 I can consider. And so it can be hard to break out of that. And so even though it's quite good for that sort of ideation, brainstorming phase, I think, as you said, talking to your colleagues and not giving them your list, but saying, what do you think? What are your thoughts? What have I missed here? I think that's always going to be essential, that sort of creativity to the research.
Yeah.
Can I just add to that?
Yeah, it's on.
Okay. Thinking about collaborating with our colleagues, it also comes through even in things like reading literature, that when you read someone's article, you engage with them in a conversation. You find out their perspective. You sometimes, meet them at a conference and you're like, oh, I read your research on such and such, and that sparks conversation and connections. Reading literature, often, you reach out to someone as a result. But I think that if you've got GPT or some kind of AI technology telling you what articles to read and summarizing them for you, you don't get that same human element and connection with colleagues in the field. So I think there's similarly, there's a place for kind of very superficial kind of summarizing in that, but not the human.
I think I agree. We need to make sure that we know who's in control here, that it's the human that stays somehow in control or in the loop or engaged. So, yes, certainly. I did want to ask you, Ali, one question. So, AI in research is one thing, but another thing is research about the use of AI, and I'm presuming that's still completely, fair game and an important topic, more important than ever. We need to study how this thing is being used and how it can be well used, and in particular what you were doing in evaluating the output from AI seems to be a very important task.
Yeah, great question, Ali. So that's actually something that really interests me as a qualitative methodologist, and where I see my own research going in the future, in the imminent future, is exploring qualitative researchers' use of AI across the various aspects of the research process, and exploring, how do people find using it? Where do they see the benefits and the drawbacks and the pitfalls? And I think, but again, within that, within the particular paradigm that they're working, and how that impacts the ontology, epistemology, and methodology of their work.
Okay. I've got one other question for both of you, I suppose, and this is a money question. We have to pay for these AI services that we're using, and the more we do it, basically there are going to be giant multinational companies that clip the ticket on every research piece that we do. I wonder if either of you or both of you could speak to that.
I mean,
there's a good mic and a bad mic.
Yeah, there's a good mic and a bad mic. I mean, this one's working. Research is already kind of pay to win, in that we get grants so that we can pay students and pay RAs and buy equipment. And, there's already this whole, the rich get richer. There's all these issues already. And so in some ways, it's just, as you said, it's sort of adding to that. We have to get grants to pay students, to pay for research, to publish. We've got to increasingly pay open access fees. And so AI being a bigger part of that is how do we make this sustainable? And I think it also becomes an issue for early career researchers who don't have money, who don't have the same opportunities. And so I don't know, it's probably a question for our leaders here, is how do we support or enable the use of AI if it is going to cost money. That being said, I will also quickly say that the open source community, for example, has gone a long way in their models, and so I'm really hopeful that the whole democratization of AI will allow us to have our own models, maybe in-house that we can host, or even on our own computers, and then that means we can stay away from those sort of big evil corporations and keep more autonomy.
Good point.
Probably just to summarize, and this is definitely out of my wheelhouse, but it's not even the financial cost of AI, but what about the environmental impact of AI that we often don't see, but we need to explore further. And I know you were recently, and actually all three of you were mentioned in that article, and the environmental impact.
Good. Okay. Well, I think we'll call it there for AI in research, and let's move on to AI in teaching and learning. So before I do, can I just hands up if you're at the university? Put your hands up if you're here at the any university actually. So not everyone here. And now put your hand up if you use AI. Okay. So we have a community of users here, which is great to see. We're talking to those who know, in some sense. Let's move on to AI in teaching and learning. And I'll start off again by introducing my colleague, Simon McCallum from the School of Engineering and Computer Science. He's going to pace the floor.
So, kia ora, ko Simon McCallum aho. I've been teaching for about 30 years, right? So, as a lecturer, when I first started teaching, I thought that my role was to impart information. So I'd have content-heavy lectures, I'd have maths on slides, I'd be trying to get the stuff that's in my head into the heads of my students, thinking that that was my role. I quickly learned that that's not my role at all. My role has been to inspire my students to want to learn what I'm trying to teach. Because very quickly, in the late 90s, the internet was available, and all of the things that I was teaching, all of the knowledge I was teaching was available online. And so my students didn't need me to be a font of knowledge. They needed me to care about them. Now, the thing is that a lot of education for the last 100 years has been a combination of, I want you to become more like me, right? And I'm going to create assessments to drive you forward. And I think that by assessing, I can measure how much you've learnt. And our assessments were actually not about how much you learnt. They were often on what you produced, because producing something requires time and effort. And learning requires time and effort. And if I just assess your time and effort by measuring what you can produce, I somehow get a proxy for your learning. AI has destroyed that relationship. AI means that I can now produce an output without the same effort, right? And without the same time. And so all of our previous assessments have basically been thrown out the window. We can no longer assess the way we were. It also means that the things that I'd been teaching, the idea that, if I've got lots of knowledge in my head, that gives me value, right? That somehow I am valuable in society because I'm very clever, right? I've learned a lot of things that are hard to know, and then people will pay me to either, as a lecturer, talk about those things I know, or in industry, perform tasks using that knowledge. AI has also come to destroy that. So we're actually moving to a space where being clever will not have any transactional value. I will not make money by being clever, because if you want the best chess player in the world, it is the AIs. The AIs beat every human being. So if your life depended on winning a game of chess, you would not rely on a human to do that. You would get a machine to be your gladiator, right? Now, as a human, I play chess because I enjoy it, not because I want to make money by being a great chess player. And so the transition of AI in the academy is that the blip of the Industrial Revolution where universities went from being like 4% of the population who just loved learning and loved knowing things and were kind of, you know, slightly weird because they didn't actually make stuff. They just loved to know things, right? That small 5% of the population who feel that way were going to universities. And then somehow we had this information revolution and technology revolution where it was some transactional value in being clever. That's going to disappear. There will be no transactional value in being clever. Humans will not be the best way of achieving a cognitive task. It will be AI, which will then mean that our bubble of suddenly large numbers of people coming to the academy, that will disappear. We will go back to being 5% of the population who are passionate about learning and who are here because they love internalizing knowledge. The academy will become the gym membership for the mind, right? You do it not because you think I'm going to become strong so I can make money. I do it because I love having things in my own head. So the effect on teaching and learning is that we move to engaging students. We give them motivation to want to learn things, but we don't rely on this gatekeeping for a financial future because there is no future financially in being clever. It is just a health and well-being of having fun stuff in our own head. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Okay, so next up we have Sarah Jane O'Connor from the School of Science and Society, a very interesting and relevant school for this particular questions, I'm sure you'll agree. And over to you to think about AI and teaching and learning.
Kia ora, Ali. Kia ora koutou katoa, ko Sarah Jane toko ingoa. I teach science communication in the School of Science and Society, and unlike, I haven't got quite as much teaching experience as Simon. I've only been here since 2020, which you will agree has been a very busy few years with lots of things changing. I did manage to teach 3 weeks in person before we went into lockdown in 2020, so I've done a lot of different types of teaching over that time. There was something that Ali said that really connected with me, which was thinking about the ways that our disciplines, or starting from a place of where our disciplines inform how we are teaching and learning about AI. So I teach science communication, I have a background in journalism. From my personal perspective, I'm really scared about what generative AI might mean for both me, my discipline, but also my friends and my students who are currently or will go into workplaces where we are creatives, we create content, we write, we create podcasts and art and video. We try and engage people, we try to engage a general public with science topics that are sometimes very tricky and complicated and contested. We try and meet people where they are in terms of the knowledge that they have, the values that they have, the worldview that they might be viewing information from. And I'm worried about what that means for my own discipline. I'm worried about what it means for misinformation, because suddenly we have misinformation that can look very polished, very tidy and clean. And how are we going to know what is real? How are we going to be able to discern what information is trustworthy, what information we should be relying on when we're making really important decisions about our lives? So in science communication, I'm thinking about climate change and sustainability and vaccination, and how do we help people make those decisions about their own lives? There was something else that Simon said, and I think possibly it's because I've come in teaching a different discipline and more recently than you, but the idea of just imparting knowledge is not something I think about in my teaching. And in fact, science communication as a discipline has gone through many decades of moving away from what we'd call a knowledge deficit mode. So I'm just going to give you information about GE. Thank you, I've got applause for that. Or I'm going to give you information about climate change and you're just going to do what I want you to do. That was the trend in science communication for a long time, and we are moving away from that. We now want to know what people think and value and are concerned about, and how do we then shape our communication to best build trust and connection with our audiences. So maybe I'm coming in a little bit later, but potentially the journey that Simon, you're talking about, I think my discipline has been doing for decades, and we're already kind of coming, so I've come into teaching 25 years after you, already thinking about some of that. So then that's kind of my perspectives on my discipline, but I'm here to talk about teaching, so I then have to go into a classroom and decide how I talk to my students about this. And what I've been doing at the moment, I'm teaching a third year science communication capstone course, so these students are in their final trimester of their degrees. They're very excited to be finished, and they're scared about what's coming next, whether it's more study or going into the workplace. And so just last week we had a conversation in class asking them what they think about AI in their coursework. So I can tell them what I think, and they do know what I think, trust me, I'm very opinionated about things when I need to be. But I sat down with this class and we spent an hour talking about what they think, getting them to talk to each other. And they told me things like they're worried about that AI is just going to perpetuate the same biases that society, Western societies, and in particular Western science has had for many, many centuries. So in science and society, we're teaching students to be critical about science, about the systems that we think and work within. And it's really encouraging to me and to my colleagues when our students can then talk really thoughtfully about what their concerns are. What does it mean for Indigenous knowledge? What does it mean for Indigenous data sovereignty? What does it mean for people's copyright and intellectual property? What does it mean for people who are creatives, who we still want to create things? One thing that has been banging around in my head is a quote I saw that we want AI to do the bad parts of our jobs. We don't want it to do the good, creative, fun parts of our jobs. And so as much as I am excited about some of the efficiencies that we might gain, I still want to protect the work that I do that is fulfilling and enjoyable and creative and allows me to collaborate with my students and my colleagues and our wider society. The students are also worried about what it means for them in the workplace. They're not sure if it's a fad at the moment or if it's something that they're going to be expected to do. The last few weeks we've had workplaces coming in to talk to my students, and we've been asking them, or I've been asking them, are you currently using AI in the workplace? And at the moment they're not. That's partly because of the kinds of workplaces that I work with. So some of you may have been following the New Zealand Herald's recent AI editorials that have been written, and newsrooms are having crisis meetings like these last few weeks about what is the role of AI in their own newsrooms. And so I'm trying to make sure that our students are thinking critically about the use of AI so that they're not, they're able to take the wider learning that we've been doing, that critical, empathetic, value-driven thinking. And when they do go into workplaces, I'm not just training them to do the job or to do the exact, we're not a vocational institute in that sense, but I'm hoping that we're training them to really think and talk and discuss critically about these topics, about these tools that will be in their workplaces in some form that we can't actually guess at just yet. Thank you.
Cool, thank you so much. So in just opening up some of those topics that you've touched on, one thing that strikes me is this interesting conversation that we're having with people who are using it, whether they're teachers or students. And it's interesting to ask, rather than just thinking kind of fatalistically about AI, AI is coming from Silicon Valley, it's arriving down the pipe. We can think, how would we like it to be? What changes would we like to see? What rules would we like to see there? What functionality would we like AI systems to have, for instance, in teaching and learning? And both of you have been thinking about some of the things that AI can do. I wonder if I can just ask you, if you had a kind of list of things, of desiderata that you would like for AI, what would you like to see? I'm just springing this question on you. So, yeah. But it's not currently doing, I guess.
Yeah, so for me, I value the ability to detect misinformation. So I'm not actually interested in whether something is written by AI or by a person. I want to know if it's true or not, right? And so for me, the truth of information is far more important than the origin of information, right? So I don't like that whole, like the authority fallacy of going, well, an authority said it, so it must be true. It's kind of, no, I will critique any information I receive. So for me, I think the skill that an AI could add, the problem with this is every day there are new skills coming about, so I don't know what to ask it to do because I'm already exploring what it can currently do. And one of the things I really like to do with bias is I push the AI away from a center position. So many people, when they use AI, will just ask it a question. So what I say is, no, I want the answer to this from 5 different perspectives. So tell me from a libertarian perspective, tell me from a unionist perspective, tell me from an American perspective, tell me from a Chinese perspective. I will ask it to take perspectives and move away from the center. And I think recognizing that that it's not supposed to be in the center. That's where I'm supposed to be. And particularly the thing it doesn't do well now is accurate confidence. It sounds confident in everything it says. It would be great if AIs gave more nuance in their answers around how confident or lack of confidence there should be in the answer they're giving.
I think maybe my take would be what you're describing of the AI kind of meeting in the middle, because you're engaging with it critically, and that's great, but I don't know that, how do we get people to be using it in that way so that they are, because I could see, we were talking in class last week, that it could be a way to create an audience member and say, all right, what does this person want to know? What are their questions about this topic? And then we'll create a communication around it. There's ways that it could be really exciting, but we still need to know what the models it's being trained on and what biases it's perpetuating to know to product to make sure that we're getting more than just the meeting in the middle.
Yeah.
So in terms of the what it's been trained on, so one of the interesting projects that we're thinking of doing with Te Papa is fine-tuning a model on historical diaries and then creating a conversation with a historical figure based on their writing. So that's retrained, so it understands language and then is retrained with their perspectives, right? To try and create a simulacrum of them. So there's some really interesting stuff that, you could use AI for.
How many of those historical figures are not white men?
Well, they've got a collection of writings from different people and diaries from different people. So there is some diversity. Maybe not as much as we would like, because we have to acknowledge that in history, it was sexist, right? And you can't just whitewash that and assume that, the history didn't require us to fight against those biases.
So, do either of you have something to say? I'm not sure.
Just what are we talking about? Apart from this, what was your original question?
Well,
What would I like AI to do? From a teaching perspective, I think one thing is the use of it as, and I'm going to say this very carefully, as part of tutoring is a really powerful opportunity, because, and it's something I've been sort of trialing in my first year course, is giving them a ChatGPT instance that's been trained on my lecture slides, and they can talk to it, they can ask questions and engage with it critically and learn that it will make mistakes and learn to question it and learn through using it how to use it appropriately. And especially if you are someone who English is not your first language, or you have different learning requirements to what your university is designed for, all those people will benefit much more, or they will benefit from having these tools where they can say, hey, explain it to me using this language, or explain it to me in a way I can understand based on what you know about me. And so to me, there's a really big opportunity there to have it as part of our learning experience. And then that can free our tutors up to do things like have discussions in labs, to be available and have those deeper discussions.
yeah. Actually, that idea of freeing up the human professionals to do the work that they're supposed to be doing, that crops up in an academic environment, but also in professional environments. For instance, you hear this a lot when people are thinking about AI being used in hospitals or in healthcare, right? The human health workers will be freed up if they're not having to do all this admin stuff. And so that's another thought. Just one thing I'm reflecting on, looking at the panelists here. We have panelists who are AI researchers from the School of Engineering and Computer Science over there, and then we have panelists who are from elsewhere in the university, and it's an extremely interesting discussion which has to involve technologists, but also people who are not technologists, because the people who are technologists don't have the necessary skills in the areas of social impact and social science, to name just a few. So it's a very interesting interdisciplinary conversation. I'm glad we have representation. Unfortunately, the AI people on this team do happen to be white men, but that's often a problem in our school and in our discipline that we have to fix somehow. But anyway, I just wanted to ask a brief, actually we've run out of time on this one. So I think we'll move on to the topic number 3 here, which is AI in knowledge production, which is like half of the point of a university, and so a very interesting kind of place to finish with. So in this area, we're going to start off by asking Alex Beattie, who's from the School of English Film, Theatre Studies, Media, Communication and Art History, for his view on that, because that's where you really might imagine this being the crucial question. So please, Alex.
Thanks, Ali. Kia ora. Ko Alex Beattie tuku ingoa. I want to start by tōtoko to SJ. I agree that sharing knowledge, teaching, is more than just imparting information. In my field, in media studies and communication, it's storytelling. And that's more than just being the smartest person in the room. That's understanding about telling stories, curating information. Shout out to the librarians here. I see you. But I'm pro-AI. And I'm pro-AI because it makes my discipline relevant, which is awesome. I'm a digital media scholar, so I'm interested in apps, social media, and you can't escape AI when it comes to that sort of thing. Think about when you search for information, when you read the news, there's AI behind that in your news feeds. Think about when you take a photo with your camera, there's AI assisting in the production of that photo. Thinking about movies, when you choose to watch something on Netflix, there's an algorithm that's reading about what you've watched previously, that's making a recommendation on what you watch. So I think it's critical that we bring to attention those little micro decisions that are influencing our everyday lives. And that's what I try to teach my students, that AI is already influencing the knowledge that we're consuming in society. But by no means should we let AI remain unchecked. I disagree with Simon that the university will become a gym for the mind. That sounds very Steve Jobs to me, and we need the Steve Jobs in this world to be very pro about technology. But I don't think AI is going to usurp the economic system. I think it generally, if left unchecked, will extend the economic system. In my discipline, we study the history of technology, and every single time there's a new technology, the internet, the printing press, television, we're like, wow, oh my God, this is amazing. This is going to liberate us or enslave us. And what in reality tends to happen is something in the middle. It changes what we do, but it doesn't tend to change the economics. It extends them. And if you take search, for example, I think we need to politicize how it's changing the way we search or consume information. When we used to search for information, it was a public good. We would go to libraries. Shout out to librarians again. You know, when Google came along, it privatized search and it had huge ramifications. We need to do the same with AI. If AI is replacing search, if students, young people are using TikTok to search for information or ChatGPT, what are the implications when searching for information is a for-profit business? We need to politicize that, and we need to resource our staff to understand the implications and to do something about it. And I'm also a little bit tired of this question of whether AI is going to replace humans, whether it's more creative than humans. I think the more interesting question is how it can extend our humanity and lead to new forms of creativity. And I just want to shout out a couple of examples of really awesome AI creativity, one that's local and one that's international. There was a Brian Eno documentary that screened last Friday, I think at the embassy. I didn't get to see it, I was really gutted, but a good friend of mine told me about it. Brian Eno, if you don't know, is a famous producer, one of the figures behind the ambient music scene in the UK. And the director of this documentary combines over 300 hours of interview footage with Brian Eno, with music videos and other footage, but they used a bespoke AI software system to cut it in a unique way. And every time the film is aired, it's different. And they're calling it generative documentary. So this is a new type of storytelling, right? This is not replacing human creativity, it's offering a new type of storytelling. How cool is that? And then here locally in Wellington is this new digital art space called The Grid. Has anyone been to The Grid on Hastings Street? It is so cool. The last exhibition was called Rivers of Wind, and for any big wind nerds out there like myself, it's super, super cool. What they've done, Delaney James, is they've taken 8 years of wind data from the Wellington Airport and condensed it into a 40-minute visual simulation of wind. And it's so incredibly immersive and experiential, and it's the sort of art that's not possible without advanced computational methods. So again, it's an example of how creativity can be extended through computation and simulation. So just want to shout out to that. But the important thing is, if we want artists and knowledge producers to be able to do that, we need to support them, we need to resource them. So we need to be talking about open data. data commons and not just put all this data behind private walls. So I'll end there, but yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much, Alex. Very interesting. So our final panelist on this topic is Tanya Ruka from the School of Design and Innovation. Please, Tanya.
Okay. Kia ora koutou. Can you hear me? Everyone hear me? Hello? Oh, that was good. Ko Tanya Ruka ho, Ngāti Pāko, Ngā Puhi, Te Iwi. So I agree, and tautoko most of my presenters here. I think that it's really important to consider communities of care, and AI is a really good opportunity to kind of bring this to the forefront of how we're looking after communities. I'm an Indigenous contemporary artist, so I work in a community-based arts practice, and we need support right now. I mean, as in storytellers, artists, designers, AI and generative AI and all the very varied platforms that are coming out now, you know, a couple of seconds and you've got a graphic. This is something that would have taken a designer at least a few hours, days or weeks to develop. And now if you ask for a prompt, you can get a more sophisticated short film, animation, novel, illustrated novel, and also graphic novels are possible now. So for us as designers and teaching down at the design school, this is a big issue. And as lecturers, we've all got different policies when it comes to using AI. And it's taking us a lot longer to mark the work because we have to try and see how much AI is involved in the work. So it's an unfolding issue. And that's why I say it's really great to think about those communities of care and support and how we're using AI. So on the flip side of that, I'm also Executive Director for Native Land Digital, and we're counter-mapping Indigenous territories around the globe. So I get to talk to Indigenous people a lot about our knowledge systems, and we're actually creating an Indigenous Data Sovereignty Treaty in order to use our API. And when you're thinking about knowledge systems and Indigenous knowledge systems, a lot of that time there's sacred knowledge that's available now out there on the internet. So many Indigenous groups are thinking about, right, how do we lock down our sacred knowledge, but still have it available for the generations that are coming behind us who are more interested in TikTok than they are listening to their elders. So these are conversations that we're having a lot, and there are Indigenous groups who are training AI to recognize the oral stories and also their sacred artworks. So that's really exciting as well. And for myself, I spent from 2014, I was looking into regeneration and Indigenous knowledge. As an arts practitioner, I wanted to actually have some form of feedback with the environment, not just make artworks for galleries. So around 2018, 2019, I thought, how do we train AI to teach us to have an Indigenous mind? And I've been waiting, lurking in the background for AI to become open source because I work with communities. I think everything should be available to communities without resources. And every now and then I'll tap into AI. What is the Mātauranga Māori concept, and wait for it to feed back, ask it how would you use it in a paragraph. And for a long time it kind of didn't make sense. It didn't get Mātauranga Māori concepts at all. And it was only fairly recently that I tapped into ChatGPT 4.0 and asked it, I said, kia ora, do you know the meaning of manaakitanga? And it said back to me, kia ora, and had this huge list of reasoning, and it absolutely understood the intrinsic meaning of these words. And I was like, do you know Māori? Yes, the life force. Again, a massive list of what Māori was. And so I'm like, I'm designing a kaupapa Māori framework. If I give you this framework in a graphic, can you translate it? Yes, sure I can. comes back, all this data, making all sorts of connections, all sorts of reasoning, and I'm like, ooh, okay, can you calculate the MODI of mining on Indigenous lands? And it did, it fed back. The MODI meter is -3 for most detrimental, had -3 for all of the options except for economic, which was -2. And it sort of, in its reasoning, said that even though finance will come to Indigenous communities, potentially that finance doesn't reach the community itself. And then I typed in, okay, what are the solutions that you would suggest based on this kaupapa Māori framework? And it came back with a really great balanced argument of how contemporary use of technology is dependent on these minerals and mining, and tried to balance it for the Indigenous communities. Unfortunately, it didn't give me back the response I wanted, which was, don't mine on Indigenous communities, but I'm working on it. So yeah, that's the end of my talk.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks so much. So Tanya, I might just start with a question for you. I'm very curious to know what Maori communities think of this new crazy stuff. Do you have a sense of that? I know some of our colleagues have talked a lot about this, and I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think what's really exciting is the innovative thinking that's happening and processing. I know there's a lot of excitement because Indigenous people globally see it as an opportunity to disrupt the Western kind of oppressive capitalist systems. Yeah.
And there's actually an extremely interesting debate happening at the moment about whether data science as a whole, not just thinking about AI, but predictive models more generally, are going to be a useful instrument for helping disadvantaged communities or other groups in New Zealand, whether it's low socioeconomic or Indigenous or Pacific communities. Are they going to be an instrument for helping, or are they going to be an instrument for perpetuating bias? And I think there's a huge kind of like pivot that we can imagine going here. And if we push in the right way, then they could be very helpful. But let's just come to this question of creation content more generally. I wanted to ask, would it be useful if we had, this is like, I'm thinking about something that I would like to ask for, if we had a tool that could tell reliably whether some piece of content, whether it's a picture or a text, was written by AI or not. Would this be useful? You were mentioning that it takes longer for you to mark assignments because you've got this extra job, so it hasn't removed work from you as a teacher, it's giving you extra work. But if you had a tool that could reliably say, yep, human generated, no, this is completely AI generated, or here's something in between, would that be useful for you guys?
I think it would be like Turnitin. Yeah. Very useful.
What do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, in my last class, I'm getting my students to create an explainer video to explain, you know, pretty dense media theories, and we compared a previously submitted human version to an AI-generated one. And it was actually quite a fun exercise to push the tool and to compare the two. And let's just say the human one was far better. But yeah, I think those tools would be useful. I know that they're really hard to be accurate though, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. So I'm wondering, when you were talking in your presentation, you mentioned that there need to be checks or something. Or, there are checks on the technology. Do you think there's any uses here that should be simply banned? I know that, you know, every so often in our sort of technology, there are things that we can do, for instance, cloning, or this new issue of like actually what you can do in genetic engineering, which is completely relevant today, given the announcement this morning. Things that we can do, but we choose not to. Do you think there's anything like that in this area of AI? And I also like to throw this question out to the people who are listening. If you have questions, hold on to them, and then you can come and talk to the panelists at the end of the hour. So please, remember the questions you have and come and talk to us. But
I mean, yes, this is something that the EU AI Act is taking a risk management approach, right? And I guess when the stakes are really high, so in electoral campaigns, political ads, we all know what happened in the United States in 2016 when social media was involved allegedly in the election of a certain someone. So misinformation can become even more powerful and damaging when AI is powering it. So certainly.
It's actually useful for you to mention social media there, because the whole of social media is powered by AI. The recommend algorithm that throws items into your news feed or recommends Spotify movies or Spotify songs or Netflix movies, talking of content creation, those recommend algorithms literally are machine learning devices of the sort that us engineering people teach to our students. It literally observes each user and sees what they're interested in, what they click on, and then learns what they click on, and then gives them more of the same. So there's AI in a lot of the things that we're doing, for several hours a day, and there's influences that arise through there as well that go way beyond the academy. I suppose I just wanted to mention that. But I guess we're coming to the end of the hour. I'd like to just ask, are there any other thoughts? And in particular, what else can Vic be doing? What else should we be doing? Should we have new courses? Should there be new training for students? Are there new student graduate attributes? Where are we, and what else can we do, I suppose?
Shall we go down the line, or?
Yeah, let's have everyone say something as a way of finishing off.
I don't have a good reputation with microphones. I think, to me, one of the key things is that people graduating should have an understanding of what AI can do at the moment, and also have built up an ability to critique it and to critique the use of it. And so that goes beyond just using the tool to be able to analyse the pros and cons, these sort of societal impacts and so on. And that requires both some fundamental knowledge of some of the basic ideas in AI, but also that sort of critic and conscious society role that we as academics have. I think that needs to be extended to our students more and more, because issues like misinformation, disinformation, bias and so on is not something we can all solve, but we need our graduates to also be tackling that and be aware of that.
Yeah, I think you've summed that up really well. I would be advocating for just continuing to teach students critical thinking and critical use of AI. Equally, as researchers, should be tackling that question.
So some of the research when they introduce AI into a business is that if you teach everybody how to use the AI and you make it equally available, then it actually lifts the weaker employees and the new employees more than the senior employees. However, if you just laissez-faire and let whoever wants to use it however they want, the more advanced staff use it more effectively than the weaker staff. So the only way to actually address the inequalities that AI is going to introduce would be by us actively teaching how to use it critically. And so we need to engage and be teaching students this stuff, not just hope that it will magically work out outside, and once they go into industry, we'll teach them fundamentals and somehow that will help them use AI well. So I think we need to embrace the teaching of how you use AI effectively.
I think in terms of what Vic should be doing or could be doing is, going back to your earlier question, Ellie, that we're not going to be able to detect it, we're not going to be able to block it. Even if we tell students not to use it, it'll be within Grammarly, it'll be within Google search. And so thinking about the ways that we are talking to students that aren't just telling them don't use it. So what I forgot to say is the reason my course and I were having this conversation last week is because I've decided that we're going to co-produce our course policy about AI rather than me tell them this is what you can use it for. And so really engaging with students in how we teach them and how we talk to them about it, and making sure that they're part of the conversation as well, that we're not just enforcing something top down.
Yeah, kia ora, SJ. I'm just going to talk to you. I think empowering our students to come up with their own ideas and policies. Let's do this bottom up.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's the same for me as well. Is just they have to know how to use these tools because that's what's being used out there in the industry. So just how they think about the work that they make is so important.
That point you made, Alex, about bottom-up, is so important. The optics of this, where you have a panel of experts talking to everyone else, is entirely wrong. Of course, there has to be information about how it works and how it's being used, but there also needs to be information coming from citizens and from students and from everyone that come literally from the use cases and from users, and that's just as important, if not more important, so we can make this work. But I just want to finish by saying, it's really obvious to me that the natural unit for discussion about AI, like in the university here, is not a school, is not a department, is not a faculty. It's the university as a whole, and that's, you know, the right unit for discussion here, because this is so interdisciplinary. And I wish that we'd had people also from the faculties of law down in Pipite and from the schools of government and so on, because they're relevant too. This is genuinely a matter of discussion for the whole university. And I think with that, can we please thank our panelists? Very interesting conversation.
Thank you all. It remains my happy duty to very briefly sum up and to thank everybody. So in the spirit of this being a collaborative debate, I felt I should concentrate on the points that the panel all agreed on. In the research space, Ali and Andrew both referenced the efficiency that AI can bring, particularly with the example of a literature review. And that caused me to recall the quote by Matt Alverson in his book on social science called The Return to Meaning, where he said, never before has so much been written by so many, saying so little and read by so few. And as such, the temptation to use generative AI to generate literature reviews and grant applications, which actually I do enjoy writing, is very tempting. So how do we ensure that the criticality, the ethics and the integrity are always woven through our activities? Simon and Sarah Jane both mentioned in a lot of ways the evolution of teaching from the sage on the stage through the guide on the side and now into a space of where we inspire learners, where the academy, I like this quote even though Alex didn't, is the gym membership for the mind. And as Sarah Jane clearly showed, the anxiety that we feel and that our students feel is to a certain extent allayed by the critical thinking skills that the Mind Gym, the university, is imparting. And finally, Alex and Tanya, you both highlighted the role of storytelling in our collective increase in understanding. And it was only a few years ago, possibly only a year ago, where people would have doubted the ability of generative AI to be a compelling storyteller. But in the same way that we went 63 years from the Wright brothers to Neil Armstrong, ChatGPT is going through the same sort of acceleration. But as Alex pointed out, the existential fear we have when faced with technology, well, if you were going to extrapolate the space landing, we'd all be teleporting by now. So things are going to level out. And the most important thing that we can all do as the university, as staff, as students, as alumni, and as the community, is lean into that critical thinking, the ethics, the integrity, and as Ali put it, the transparency of how we use AI. So that is enough of a summary for me. It just remains for me to thank our panelists, to thank our MC, to thank the organizers and to the events team, and to thank the audience here today, and to invite you all to join us for refreshments and to continue the conversation with the panelists. Thank you very much.